without further ado, many of you may know our speaker this month, Jim Coulthard, who was the administrator here for 3 years?
3 years, yep.
3 years. Seemed longer than that. In a good way.
Good recovery.
Jim's background before he came to us was in the not-for-profit sector. He was administrator, executive for a number of organizations in the not-for-profit sector. And since he's left us, he's become an educator at NBCC and doing lots of presentations like this on Mohawk Airlines, and I'm sure some things on World War II and the Air Force and those kinds of things. So without further ado, Jim Coulthard and Mohawk Airlines.
Make sure I'm all kitted up. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Great. Well, again, it's good to be back with friends and acquaintances, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a son I have in the audience from another mother and father who I didn't have to pay his medical school bills for. Dr. Avinash Kamampati, who went to school with our son Steve, and is a longtime family friend. Thank you. But thank you all for coming. As Rose said, my catnip is mostly World War II aviation in the central New York area. But a while back, I got thinking about some other aspects of things as I came across different personalities. And those of you who do anything with history know that oftentimes you'll start out one direction, and then you'll get a bit of information that maybe takes you down a side street, okay? And so, long story short was, and I will show you pictures from this, so I don't expect any of this to wind up on Facebook as blackmail. But in 1965, my folks took us, my older brother and younger brother, I don't think my sister, who was a baby at the time, made the trip, but we went to the World's Fair. And that was the year that the World's Fair, although it happened in '64, they also kept it going for an extra year. So it was a big adventure, you know, got on the plane, flew down, spent the day, and then came back. But it was truly an impressive story. All right, so let me dive right in here. This is going to be Mohawk Airlines, and this is the story from 1945 to 72. We get things to work here. Everything started out with the gentleman right here, Cecil Johnson. He was, Cecil Robinson, my bad. Cecil Robinson. He was a businessman from the Ithaca area, and here's not a lot of pictures about him, so here he is as a close-up of him. His business was aerial photography, and he was an Ithaca person, and this is a picture taken, there must have been some dignitaries, probably Chamber of Commerce types down in the Ithaca area. This is the original municipal airport. Oh, and by the way, before I get too far down the road, first of all, feel free to correct me on anything, and second of all, if you have information, I have a couple of cards up here. I'm always willing to add people's personal recollections, if it fits, into the story. So feel free to share when we get a chance. So Cecil, again, had an aerial photography business, and in the beginning, this was right down near the downtown Ithaca area. Since then, it has been transformed into something called the Hangar Theater. So let's see here. So Cecil put together this business, but during the war, he made his money by using aerial technology that the Allies used. And, but at the time, the federal government ceased worrying about airline, and particularly connector airlines, since the major emphasis was the war effort. However, in 1944, the Civil Aeronautics Board indicated that they'd be willing to allow a series of smaller airline connections between various smaller communities. And Cecil jumped right on that because what happened was, in the course of setting up his business, initially, well, he was from Ithaca, but he had his business down in the Teterboro Airport area outside Metro New York. And what he found was he was spending time shuttling people back and forth between Ithaca, another business location for him, and the Metro New York area. And so he kind of got tired of doing that. So he made his money by a patent suspension invention that the mounts for the cameras rested on. It turns out if you're at high altitude, the rubber they were using got brittle. But what he did was he came up with an innovation that made it so that was spun steel instead, and it was much more durable in the process. So that's how he came by his money. Here's some news information about him starting his business up in the Ithaca area. Here's a picture of his Teterboro facility, and then this is, gotta get a little geeky here on airplanes, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum. This is a Fairchild 24, which is one of the personal planes that he used to shuttle people back and forth. And if you probably can't see it real well, but it says Robinson Airways there. And in the course of putting together the business, he also hired Gesundheit. He hired a recently back from the war naval officer named Bob Peach, okay, who had made a name for himself in academia at that point, and he was a distinguished aviator, naval aviator. But I'll talk about him a little bit here. So let's get back to Cecil. He realized that aviation was the up and coming business model to use, much like we've seen over different decades, things like mass communications, radio broadcasting, computers, things like this. The wave of anything in the 30s and 40s was aircraft, okay? And so he and some of his friends and fellow alumni from Ithaca, from Cornell, got together and figured that they would have to move out of the Ithaca proper area and put an airport out on what's now the Heights. If any of you come in on Route 14 into Ithaca, the airport, it's where it currently is now. By the way, these are illustrations that I actually grabbed from a booklet, a speech that Bob Peach had given, showing the early illustration of some of the early aircraft in the Robinson Airways group. As you can see, there's a couple of beach, that looks like a Goonie bird there, Fairchild, that sort of thing. So again, part of the reason why my wife isn't here is because she's seen all this stuff before, and she says, just go forth and just do your thing and, you know, talk airplanes. So she lets me play once in a while. In fact, one of the planes that was used in his stable, in Robinson's stable, was a Cessna T-50. And those of us of a certain age may remember a TV series called Sky King. Okay, who was his niece? Very good. Okay. This is Songbird, and this was the first version of Sky King. He had a more modern version later on, but that's a Cessna T-50. And then later on, when things got a little better for Cecil and Robinson Airways, they picked up some Twin Beach. These could hold 6 to 11 people. Some of these pictures, by the way, I'll give credits at the end. This is what happened to come from the Oneida County History Center. This was a nice picture I got from a publication which shows one of those Twin Beaches over. This is, I presume this is Cayuga Lake, would be my guess. So, and this must be Cornell, okay? So, Robinson Airways, or excuse me, Robinson Business exists now as Robinson Aerial Surveys, and they're located in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And they do a whole spate of topics. They mostly aerial type of things, but they do aviation, landfill, utilities, federal, municipal, UAVs. So they're still in business. I'm not aware that there are any Robinsons in the family, but my guess is that they're probably grandchildren at this point. Okay, so back to the story here. Cecil wanted to get more into the airline business, but he apparently had, by the accounts I've read, had kind of a laid-back management style that wasn't necessarily conducive to running things on time or with a level of efficiency. And in order to grow, he needed capital. And the person who could supply that was a Binghamton area businessman named Edwin Link. And of course, and the other thing before I lose this picture is here on the far right is that pilot, Bob Peach, that was hired. Bob was going for his law degree at Cornell, but he liked flying from his time in the Navy, so he kind of was doing both. Quite the industrious person. But Edwin Link, here's some more pictures from the early days. Some of these folks here we're going to talk about a little later. These are some early Robinson Airline pictures when they are procuring or about to procure some DC-3s. And they were provided, this is another Robinson Airline picture, a schedule that I actually got from here, a picture of a flight schedule out of Oneida County Airport. Edwin Link, again, famous for developing what became known as the Link trainer, which was used during World War II extensively to train pilots. Because as you can imagine, I don't know about you, but my ability to learn something new is better if it's done in a simulator as opposed to finding your way in a crash and ruining several planes in the process, so, and possibly your life. And one of his conditions, one of Link's conditions was, okay, I will loan you the money, Robinson Airways, but you gotta have somebody at the top who's got their act better together. And that was the condition for loaning what eventually became $75,000 to buy some new Goonie Birds, DC-3s, was that Bob Peach became the president. Link's story was that his father they came from the Midwest, located in Binghamton. His father procured an old factory building and made piano parts. And Edwin wanted to be a flyer. His father said, no, you need to spend time in the family business, okay? And, but his mother was a soft touch, and she basically allowed him and gave him the resources to get a pilot's license. So Ed played a key role. And here's some pictures of a Link trainer. My wife and I happened to be vacationing across in Canada last year, and I came across an actual Link trainer that was in one of the museums we visited. Pilot sat in here, as you can see, there he is right there, the cadet, excuse me. And then a number of personnel here provided scenarios that they would have to respond to, okay? So that was the idea behind that. Enormously popular, successful, and again, it saved a lot of planes and it saved a lot of lives in the process. So Link provided 75 grand so that they could get more DC-3s. And at this point, Bob Peach rose through the ranks. He started out as a pilot, sometimes pilot. He worked himself up to a manager, and eventually, obviously, the president, okay? And when he took over, initially Robinson Airways was located in the first iteration of Mohawk Airlines was located in Ithaca, okay? And in late 1950, 58, the headquarters were moved to Oneida County Airport. Okay. So I just like that. It's a nice picture of the DC-3. Personal privilege here. Okay, so this is the airport. Some period pictures. Obviously, this isn't, well, there's a better picture later on. This is the terminal. This is the executive office building, which we'll get to in a second here, because I found that to be a very interesting story. Catch up with me. I'm getting ahead of myself here. All right. So this is, again, the executive office building where the training center was. This is obviously the lounge and dining room at the airport. Let's see here. Some personalities. Here's Bob Peach. This is an older picture, a picture of him later on actually getting an award. Some of the people in this photograph are interesting. This is E. Victor Underwood, who was the first chairman of the board and president of Mohawk Airlines. And this is a guy I actually met years after this, obviously, when I was working at the Chamber of Commerce. Shel Storia, WKTV. And of course, here's Bob Peach. The airport building was built at a cost of $1.5 million by Oneida County, okay? And it was leased back to Mohawk Airlines for 25 years, okay? So Mohawk didn't technically own the facility, but worked out one of those great business deals that oftentimes happens when businesses are growing and going. And again, Mr. Underwood and Bob, I understand that this gentleman here is Russ Stevenson, who is a senior VP. Is that right, Kathy? Okay, senior VP at Mohawk Airlines. So, and anybody know who this gregarious gentleman is there? I haven't been able to.
It's Carl Van Scoter.
What is it?
Van Scoter.
Oh, really? Politician?
No, he was maybe head of operations.
Oh, okay. Okay, excellent. I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna get the spelling of the name afterwards. Okay? Because that's one of the questions I have. Yeah.
He ended up being vice president when I was there.
Oh, great. Okay. So thanks, guys. Let's get this record straightened out.
Which one is Mr. Van Scoter?
Van Scoter is
The one in the middle?
this one.
Yeah.
Is that him?
No, I never saw him.
Okay.
I went to school with his daughter.
All right, so a little bit more on Bob Peach here. He was born in Syracuse, graduated from Hamilton College in 1941. So he has local connections. In fact, I've spent some time up in the archives at Hamilton College with the thanks. I thank the archivist and the special collections folks up there for allowing me to paw through their stuff. And while he was in the Pacific, he commanded a squadron of patrol boats. And maybe you can help me with this, because he got 2 distinguished flying crosses and other decorations for his valor in the Pacific. But he also is credited with shooting down a Betty, which is a medium bomber that the Japanese had. Now, this is the plane that Peach flew, okay? It's called a Coronado. And now, I get that he would have credit for it, but I gotta say that it was, had a crew of 10, 50 caliber machine guns, and could carry bombs, but I don't know how the pilot got credit for the victory. So maybe somebody could share that with me at some point. But he was nonetheless, and here's a distinguished flying cross, 102 that he received. Here he is, again, thanks to Hamilton College and the library archives. Here he is, both as a student at Hamilton College, as well as just after the war in his uniform. And here he is getting the Distinguished Flying Cross. He resumed the study of law at Cornell University after the war. He took advantage of the GI Bill of Rights and really schooled up. Here are some nice pictures I found in various archives, and this is at the Itaca Airport, obviously a wintertime shot. And these are Convair's. Are you thinking? And here's some hangar shots of various crew working on the planes. Let's see here. And I like this. I had to put this in because talk about your archetypical pilot. I mean, you know, that guy is he's right out of Central Casting in Hollywood. And I actually had a woman came up to me after the talk I gave in Utica, and she said, you know, she said, I worked for Mohawk Airlines. I think it might have been reservations. And she said, you know, if they would occasionally have to do drills, emergency drills, and use the slide. And apparently, if you got a friend or two to come along, their payoff was that they would get to ride in the plane. So that get an airplane ride. And of course, here's the crew, the maintenance crew, readying a prop plane for flight the next day. Some more shots here. And again, it was a fairly prominent regional airline at the time. If you look real close, Martin Luther King Jr. On his way through he was on his way to Ithaca College for probably a talk. And I can also tell you that this was such an up-and-coming business that I don't know how many of you have ever been featured in Time magazine, but Mr. Peach was. He actually got an honorable mention in a smallish, but still more than I ever got in Time magazine. So, one of the things I found, again, as you get into history, you find out that there's some things that take you in a slightly different direction. Mohawk Airlines actually toyed with the idea of a helicopter service. And this would have been in the 50s. And here is a Sikorsky done up in the livery of Mohawk Airlines. And here's a handbill for the programs that they were going to run, or the flights they were going to run. And this is interesting. There was a gentleman, and this is one of these people I came across, David Postal, who was director of research for Mohawk Airlines. And he spent time talking to various business groups and aero industry groups. And his proposal, he was a helicopter man, and his proposal in mid-54 was to replace all of the planes that Mohawk Airlines had with helicopters, which was a total revelation to me. I had no idea. Obviously it didn't work, but he was very much a proponent of helicopters, having spent time at Sikorsky, and so he was well connected that way. Here's some more mile markers in that effort. It didn't last very long, but it got a fair amount of ink. Couldn't get a real good picture of him anywhere, but there he is right there. That's David Postal. And eventually he climbed to a high senior position at Mohawk Airlines. And let's see here. It's just as a death announcement where you get a lot of information. Those of you who do history, you know you can pick up a lot in obituaries as to people's achievements. He actually had a pilot's license. He was very active in the Air Transport Association Rotor Wing Committee and served that way. He spent time at Command Helicopters, Sikorsky, and was quite the chopper guy, early proponent of helicopters. So Peach, meanwhile, things are not sitting still. Peach is moving ahead with his grand expansion plan. And if Bob Peach was anything, he was ambitious. And it shows all of his efforts. Once he had gotten his airline going, he realized that the only way to keep things moving was to let others benefit from the same concept in different parts of the country. So he became very active in the advocacy for regional airlines across the country, and pushing for local trunk services to be treated as the same as major airlines. And these are just some of the names that you're probably familiar with. There's Piedmont, Allegheny, National, Northwest, kind of just a random gathering of things here. So in 1962, the airline grew tremendously, and it culminated in Peach winning the fight over a permanent Civil Aeronautics Board support of regional airlines. And in '65, the Mohawk began using the British BAC 111 and also started using turboprop Fairchild Hillers. And I had somebody who I'm friends with on Facebook said that the 111s were noisy and not very comfortable. And this, actually, I do remember flying on this, but I was so enthused just to be in a plane. One of the people I said that I would mention later on in those early pictures is a gentleman by the name of James Corwith, who was very much an early supporter of Robinson Airways and later Mohawk Airlines. He was very active in the Grange League Federation. His granddaughter shared this information with me, that eventually the support and the growth of the Grange League Federation led to the development of Agway. Those of us who are old enough remember Agway, and you probably remember the nice building that's now Blue Cross Blue Shield over in the shopping town plaza. So again, many different resources involved in the community. This is what comes forth as people support an emerging technology. Some neat pictures that I got, various tickets and whatnot, handbills. And that's a Fairchild Hiller, which somebody once told me was Fairchild Killer, because it didn't have a very good safety record. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. Now, a friend of the Clinton Historical Society, Barbara Couture, who was very active in the New Hartford Historical Society, shared this information with me. She worked at the Reservation Center downtown Utica at the Utica Hotel. And she's even featured in one of the, or a couple of the ads that Mohawk used. And here's a neat little diagram. This would have been 1970s routes. As you can see, at this point, Mohawk Airlines is quite the contender for the Northeast. You've got, let's see, Montreal, you've got Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, which eventually became a hub, and then connectors to Detroit, Toronto. So they really blanketed and webbed the area of the Northeast. Now, some firsts that are credited to Mohawk Airlines. They were the first in the country to hire an Afro-American airline attendant. Her name is Ruth Carroll Taylor, and she appeared in a number of their publicity shots. She was a nurse by trade, and we have an airline attendant in the audience, Kathy White, who I understand from talking and reading various descriptions, people think that the airline attendants were there just to hand out drinks and snacks. The purpose behind an airline attendant was to render assistance and first aid to the passengers if something went wrong. Okay, so is that a fair?
Maybe then, but not.
Right. Okay. So, but that was the idea, because it was flying is somewhat of a dangerous avocation or profession, depending. Go ahead, Kathy.
Our job was to be there to prevent a crash for safety reasons.
Right.
And the bonus is feeding. So we have to do that as well.
Okay, interesting. We're gonna have to talk. So again, she was a nurse by training, and here's some of the publicity shots of her. They of course got all the PR out of it that they could, I'm sure. However, although she broke that barrier, she had to retire several months later because she got pregnant. So, and that was a job requirement at the time, which is certainly not wasn't fair, but that was the rules of the time. So she both got married and pregnant. Here she is today. This was done last year, so she's now 92, and she is a folk hero in the women's rights and Afro-American women's rights, and is still going along. Last I checked, I should check and make sure she's still going and growing. Another first that Mohawk Airlines had was the centralized computer-based reservation system. My uncle Dave Terrell worked at Oriskany in the computer department, and so that's how I know this side of it. He eventually transferred U.S. Air down to, first it was Pittsburgh, then Washington. The other thing was the relationship with the Link trainer people didn't stop at Edwin Link giving them money for their planes. There was a long-time liaison between Link and Mohawk Airlines. This is actually, I found this out, this is Alan Gilberti. Yep. And he,
In Hartford.
really? Okay. Excellent. Director of Flight Training Center. And as you can see, these are advanced simulators for the types of planes that they were flying at the time. I imagine this is probably a BAC simulator, and the other one, I can't quite make out what that is. But so, let's see here. Keep going. So, another thing they did was they pioneered the use of pressurized aircraft. Why do we do that? Because you get above 10,000 feet and you want your passengers to live. So that was pretty much the reason for that. And the idea was that they could also, at higher altitudes, it cost less effort and gas to propel the plane because the air is okay. Let's see. All right, so again, in '65, they started to update their fleet, becoming the first regional airline to inaugurate jet service. And by '69, all the piston engine aircraft had been retired from the fleet. So, a little bit more about the fleet. This is a Convair 240. So this would have been late 40s, early 50s, when at the time, anybody know Claire Chenault of Flying Tigers fame? He was consultant, obviously, to Chiang Kai-shek and Madam Chiang. And but when the Chinese communists took over the mainland, they didn't need the planes, so they wanted to buy 5 Convairs. After things went back and forth for a while, it was Mohawk eventually obtained a couple of the Convairs, and then they also had to fill in the gap a little bit with a 440. That may have been the planes we were looking at, Kathy, the advanced version. It was in 1962 was a high watermark time for Mohawk Airlines. They had flown 206 million passenger miles, which is a record. In '66, they recorded a record 423 million passenger miles, and during the first same 5-year period, they had a total profits in operation of 10.6 million. And Bob Peach later on would remark that this was Mohawk's golden years. Another person that came forward as a result of the talk was a grandson of Timothy Pike, who was a big player in the regional efforts to work on efficiencies of the airline routes. and he was a RAF air observer. Here's his book, his log book that his grandson gave me pictures of. So as you can see, as Peach is putting together a world-class operation, he's truly using world resources. And here is Mr. Pike at a traffic planning group, regional traffic planning group, and he's there. I could get a better picture of that, but this is the type of group that was concerned with the Air Transport Association support, trying to make things a better, more efficient operation in terms of air, the customer experience. All right, so for the gentle people of you in the audience, you might want to cover your eyes because I'm going to talk a little bit about the gaslight service. Now, Kathy, did you have experience with this?
Briefly.
Okay, all right. The idea was to take a couple of their aging DC-3s and re-kit them on the inside as Victorian, I don't know what you would call it, establishments. And then it was sort of, at first it was, although Mohawk Airlines said anybody could fly on their planes, it was kind of became a businessman's hangout. So, okay, here we go, get ready. Yeah, a little risque. All right, so eventually, no surprise here, the wives and significant others got upset about this. And as a result, some of the planes had family sections. Now, I don't know how you cordon off these things. At any rate, eventually they had to give up on it. But here was the payoff here. During the 2 years of its existence, they served almost 32,000 cans of beer, 17,600 cigars, a ton of pretzels, half a ton of cheese, and they earned enough money to buy new planes. So I guess the price of selling oneself out is, could be very fairly profitable.
You know, we have a retired flight attendant here that did fly these. She's sitting in the back.
Is she? Oh, very okay. You still got your uniform? Oh, great! All right, I want to see you later. Nothing like some good girly pictures. All right, so this is, we're in the late 60s, early 70s, and those of us who lived through that time know that this is the less than perfect times of fixed price setting and salary setting and things like that, and so it was definitely a time of recession. I was once working for a group down in New York's, the Long Island area, and they said, Jim, how's the recession? How are things? You okay? You okay? It was 2008, they asked me. And I said, well, we're fortunate. We never pulled out of the recession of the 70s. So we had nowhere, we couldn't get worse. So at any rate, this was the good old times. I remember taking my brother to school in Alfred, and we had to take a 5-gallon can of gasoline because you couldn't necessarily get gas, and you just about get home, and then you run out, and that sort of thing. So, but that's a whole separate story. So, the pilots saw the outsourcing of commuter airlines as a threat to their jobs, and they struck in November of 1970. There was a failure in negotiations, and the debt that Mohawk had accrued by purchasing the modern jets and all the other great innovations that they did that would have positioned themselves well for the future caught up with them. And as a result, they turned to some young whippersnappers down on Wall Street, and a firm called Jet Capital, founded by two barely dry behind the ears business school graduates, Frank Lorenzo and Bob Carney. And they came up with a plan that would have saved Allegheny Mohawk Airlines, didn't mean to swear. But I would have left Bob Peach in a much diminished era than he had ever been before. And he became very disenchanted with the two gentlemen, and he was so upset that he met with Mr. Lorenzo, and he dismissed him from service to Mohawk Airlines, and he said he was going to go home and prepare a speech that evening, and this would have been April 20th. Instead, he went home and took his own life. Bob Peach did. Before it got to this point, he was so upset with the arrangement, he said, I would rather sell Mohawk Airlines to my fierce competitor Allegheny Airlines than I would to give it to you guys. So that's eventually what happened. But by that time, they had made enough money in the stock offering. And here's a relatively current day picture of Mr. Carney and Mr. Lorenzo. As we wind down here a little bit, this is a picture of Bob Peach and Bob Peach Jr. And they're from the Convair 240, and of course this is his tombstone, Bob Peach's senior's tombstone at Hamilton College. He's buried up at this college cemetery. He wrote a speech, delivered a speech, and I was able to get an actual copy of this text. He gave it to in front of a group called the Newcomers group, and it was the story of Mohawk Airlines. I tell you, there are 3 copies in the world, and I was able to get one of them and actually thumb through it and curate a lot of information about that. But it was fascinating to see the first-hand story through Bob Peach's eyes of Mohawk Airlines, from the Robinson Airlines right through to, obviously, his demise. And then in April of '72, the airlines was transferred to Allegheny, changed its name to U.S. Air and later U.S. Airways, and after merging in 1975 with American West, U.S. Airways suffered financial difficulties when they eventually bought by American Airlines in 2015. And so here's a nice little montage of the various iterations. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the crashes now. Yeah, is that what you came home? Nothing like some good gore, huh? All right, so the first fatal accident happened right here in Oneida County Airport, just off the runway. Flight 31 had a blown left engine after takeoff, and the wing hit some trees, and the plane cartwheeled in. 13 passengers and 3 crew were killed. This photograph, I thank the Clinton Historical Society for, because it's not my understanding. I don't see Gil. Is Gil here? No.
A 1934 Buffalo pumper was at the scene of that crash.
Okay, but Gil Gourin's father, Red, was supposed to have been in this picture, so that's how we came by it. Here is a Observer Dispatch picture of that same crash. And let's see, there was a bunch of mishaps that have happened throughout time here. Flight 121, which that looks to be a Convair 240, attempted to take off in a heavy thunderstorm. Didn't end well for that plane. Let's see here. Perhaps one of the best known accidents was flying out of Elmira en route to DC. It crashed in just across the Pennsylvania border. The Upon forensics here, it found out that a broken valve set the plane on fire, and obviously that led to its demise. It was a valve failure in the auxiliary power unit that resulted in an in-flight fire.
Is there one in Allentown, Pennsylvania?
It could have been. I'm not sure how far that is. My geography gets a little scarce, but,
A girl I went to school with was a stewardess on that flight.
oh no.
She was killed, maybe she knew, maybe Mrs.
So at any rate, another one happened in Lake George. This is one of these pillars. There was apparently a bad approach on the pilot's part. Wind caught them on the wrong side of the mountains up there in Lake George, and didn't have a good ending to it.
How many of them?
Let's see. Hold on.
I couldn't read it.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'll have to look, Kathy. Okay. I'm sure I have it somewhere. This is another Fairchild Hiller, crashed in Albany in '72. It was an engine that failed to feather correctly. Feathering is on a prop-driven plane is when it fails. If the blades turn into the wind, that makes it more aerodynamic as opposed to being flat and causing problems. So, at any rate, this plane crash happened about 2 streets over from where my son lives now in Albany. And he said, "Dad, I think we live right now." I said, "Yes, it would be." At any rate, an interesting postscript when this presentation went online, I was contacted by a former colleague of mine working for the State Medical Society, who was their chief general counsel in the lobbying group in Albany. And she said, "Jim, just so you know, because of the GE person that was on that plane that crashed, he was killed, of the 14 passengers, my dad got a promotion, which brought us to Albany, which the whole family relocated here. So not that there's a silver lining to a black cloud, but because of that, we had the services of a top-notch lawyer while I was working for the Medical Society. And it's one of those things. A lot of information I got from this came from the Oneida County History Center, the Regional Transportation Museum, and Hancock Airport. Even if you're not taking a flight, if you want to take a few minutes, unfortunately we got to pay for parking, but this is a free visit. They have, the theme is transportation throughout central New York in all various forms, from rail to canal to aircraft. And they have a pretty good section on Mohawk Airlines with memorabilia. I also, again, want to thank Jeremy Katz and Christian, thank you, thank you, Rose. Christian Goodwillie for access to the Hamilton College information, and of course, the stuff I was able to do under the table here while I was working at Plymouth. Shh, you didn't hear that. No. All right, now, so here's the Coulthard family side of the story here. I told you at 65 we went down to the World's Fair. This is some stuff. My dad was a bit of a photographer, like 35mm film, and took some pictures. And so, all right, now, I don't expect this to be used as blackmail, okay? So, let's see. Here is the fam. There's Mom and Dad, Stephen and Virginia. This is my older brother, Ken. That's me. My younger brother, Andrew, and little sister, Patty. certainly the 2 or 3 of us did. And these are various shots that Dad took while we were down there. I was able to digitize a lot of his 35mm slides. Kind of a neat thing that technology has allowed us nowadays. So we flew down. I want to say we flew down on a Convair because I remember it being a prop type plane. And then flew back on a BAC 111. So that's it. If anybody has any questions, if I know the answer,
When were all those crashes that you
they span, yeah, they kind of span early 60s, or 50s and 60s.
What were the years?
Well, I would say that it was, well, the one here in Oneida County Airport, what was that, 1950 something?
1953.
So this is kind of like this, and I'm sure there were other incidences that happened. So throughout the span, again, air transport is by far safe, but you know, it's gone through its ups and downs. Any other questions? Yes?
I thought it'd be really fascinating if anybody who's been a flight attendant, pilot, would just stand up and say what they did.
Please. Yes. If they wouldn't mind.
I'm actually a minority. I flew as a flight attendant in TWA 86 to 89, and then I got hired again in 2002 with Allegheny, which was the old Mohawk Airlines, flew then in 2002 to the end of 2004, and then from 2005 until the end of, well, the beginning of last year, February, I was a flight attendant with Republic Airways fund. It started out in Itaca, which was actually started by a married couple here in Utica. He was the pilot for Mohawk, his wife was, I think, in the financial side. They transitioned over to and now they're Republic Airways, and regional carrier, fly for American, Delta, United. If you fly like out of Syracuse to, say, Philadelphia on us, it'll say operated by Republic Airways, and if you're going on to Miami, it would be operated by American Airlines. So when these ladies started, there was no men. I think the first men were probably late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
Kathy, would you like to stand up, or you want to?
I was hired in 1966. It was a big deal. It was something I always wanted to do, and I did it for 24 years. Today is so different than it was back in the day. I can tell you it was hard work, long days. You didn't eat much. Your longest day would be, if you flew 8 hours, you had to have 16 hours off. And if you were on duty for 16 hours, you had to have 16 hours off. So that 16-hour day was more like an 18, 19-hour day. By the time you get to the airport, do your fly your trip, and get back, get to the hotel. It's a long day. And I think that it's the romantic thing that people think about this job, which really, it does have its aspects of romance, but it's really hard work, but it's enjoyable, and I loved it when I did it. And when I was hired, if you had to be a certain weight, a certain height, and if you got pregnant or got married, you had to quit. And it was really strict. I think what they were looking for was really, not that I am, really good looking, good figures, so to keep the guys on the airplane. So, and things were so different. When I first joined the airline, people showed up at the airport dressed in nice clothes. You know, they were professional, they didn't give you a hard time. So much different than it is today, and it's unfortunate. We thought of flying as not, I don't want to say upper class, but I mean it was classier people because of the money. You had to pay for a ticket. Now you can fly anywhere for $29 or something one way. JetBlue or one of them. It's just, I'm glad I did it then. ask me now if I wanna do it again, I don't think so. 24 years plus, and then when I got married, then when I had a baby, with this, my husband, I took time off, and it was very good, and then went back to work, and then finally said, I think I wanna stay home, so I did. It was a great job, though. Got to see a lot of things, a lot of places, a lot of opportunities. I flew all over the place before I got married, but that kind of.
Kathy, what was the most far-flung place you went to?
The farthest place?
Yeah, farthest flung. We're Europe, United States?
No, I left by the time they started doing it.
Okay.
What I could say, the airplanes I flew on was the Convair 440, the 240, the Fairchild, the BAC 111, and the DC 9, and then we got 727s, and after that I flew, I think, one trip or so on that, and then that's when I retired. It was a great job. It really was.
Would you like to say something?
This is the gaslight girl.
Yes, yes. The exits are this way, this way.
I started flying in 1959,
Wow.
and I quit in 1963 because I was pregnant with my daughter. I had gotten married, they let me stay on the airline, but I had to use my maiden name on the flight. I couldn't use my married name. And then when I got pregnant, I had to quit. I flew for almost 4 years, and I loved it. I sometimes missed it. They called me after she was born, wanted me to come back and train, but I didn't have anybody to take care of her, so I never went back, and I kind of regretted that. But I knew Peach, I knew Stevenson. Some of these other people I don't know, but I remember Stevenson, I remember Peach very well.
Okay.
Did you work out of Oneida County?
Oneida County
Oh, my
Airport.
dad was head of maintenance.
Yeah.
Howard Webster, does that ring a bell?
No.
No, okay.
It's so long ago.
We're so separated from the buildings. We rarely didn't get to see maintenance or.
I'll tell you one experience I
Please,
had that
yes.
was really exciting for me. We used to ferry airplanes from one airport to the other. They needed an airplane in another airport. The crew would fly the airplane down, usually down to New York. And this crew that I was with, this one day, it was a beautiful sunny day, we flew right down, and we flew right down Fifth Avenue. You could see. I could possibly do that today. That sticks out in my memory as quite an experience. And it was a small plane, a Convair or a DC-3. I started on DC-3s.
Really?
And the pilots told me that those planes were all from World War II.
Yeah, transfer.
They flew the hump, they used to tell me, they flew the hump over China.
Yep.
In World War II.
There is one DC-3 in this area down in, I hate to say it, Geneseo, that flies, that was a veteran of actually one of the D-Day drops. So it's still going. Whiskey 7 is the name.
It was, DC-3 was like this on the ground.
Yeah.
So you had to climb up.
Oh.
And I had to close the door, remember, and check the lock on it.
You did good.
That's pretty amazing.
And Martin Luther King flew on my flight.
Oh,
And didn't speak a word to me. He was very quiet.
Was it that, do you know if it was that?
I don't remember.
It was a Convair.
Well, I don't know, it was, like I said, I flew between 59 and 63, so it
Yeah.
was about in that.
Interesting.
How about the Martin? Did you fly on the Martin? You look familiar. I flew over for 30 years.
You flew from Mohawk?
30 years.
You're a pilot?
Yeah.
What is your name?
Gary Boat.
My maiden name was Bruce. Mary Owens Bruce.
Bruce?
Bruce.
You look familiar.
All right, Skipper, you got anything you want to say?
I flew with them for 30 years. Our biggest event of the day would be if we went to Buffalo and got chicken wings. Best place in the world.
Anybody else have something they'd like to say?
as I mentioned, my dad was maintenance supervisor in Oneida County, and we saw it all. He started there in '58, the year before I was born, and he wound up moving to Pittsburgh. He retired in '93 from whatever it was called then, I think U.S. Air. And but I could tell you, we lived the stories you were telling about the strikes and stuff. Because I was in 6th grade then, and I remember we went on food stamps and stuff. And my dad went back to work in April of '71. And not long after that, I remember him saying that Bob Peach died. Right. Yeah, so that was pretty sad.
We were based in Syracuse when the strike happened.
Really? Okay, 70?
Whenever it was, I
Yeah.
don't remember the name.
All right, before I lose everybody here, just take 2 more and then we'll call it quits.
For Mohawk in 1959 and 1960. And if you don't think technology has come a long way, I worked at the reservations and then the ticket counter. And we did everything by ticker tape. If somebody wanted to go to an area that we didn't fly, we had to make a reservation on another airline. So we would call them up on the phone to see if the seat was available. And if it was, they would confirm it, and we had a certain length of time to go and type it on the ticker tape so that they would get it. And then we would get a ticker tape confirmation that the person had the seat. It was an amazing job. We had to purchase 1 jacket, 2 skirts, 2 blouses, and heels. And I made $75 a week, and they took money out of every week's paycheck in order to pay for my uniforms. And the exciting part for me, it was fun for me because I was young and single. But the shifts were 5:30 a.m. till 2, and then 2 until midnight or when the last flight got in. And of course, I lived about an hour and a half away from here, so it was pretty early in the morning to get up and get to work. But the one exciting person that I met while I worked there was one night we had a terrible snowstorm. And we knew the flight was gonna be late, and it was like 2:30 or 2:45 when it finally ended. But it was the Syracuse University football team and Ben Schwartzwalder.
Oh.
So I was very excited.
Gotta make sure that you check out her lapel pin and also all the memorabilia that Kathy has brought up here. You can look but don't touch. She brought some of her choice collection. All right, one more question, sir, and then we're gonna wrap it.
I'm not an employee. Similar to you, I went to the World's Fair in 1964 with my family.
Oh, cool.
And we drove.
Oh.
And this speaks to the innovations of Mohawk and their creativity, particularly advertising creativity. As we were driving along the New York State Thruway, it said, if you had flown, you'd be there by now. Fly Mohawk Airlines.
All right, well, thank you all for your attention.